Welcome back to the late night format here on WESU Middletown 88.1 FM. I'm your special guest co-host, Sarah McCully, here in the studio with Adi Slepack.
Yes.
You tuned in just in time for our talk about movies.
Yes, you have. Yes, we are big movie fans here on the late night format, and we thought that we'd start a little Audible movie club where we'll share and discuss some movies, and you'll be like, oh my god, I love that movie too. Yes, that's what's going to happen on your end, and we're just going to talk and ignore you.
I just think that the audience should be aware that Adi has written the word movie down for that delivery as Mobay. W-O-V-A-Y. Mobay.
It flawlessly.
Yeah, it was great. So much respect for that. That's excellent.
So remember how we were like, oh, we're going to totally mention Halloween in passing.
I do.
We're going to do that right now. So since it was just Halloween, we thought that we would stay in the imaginary, creepy world as long as we possibly could and discuss our favorite fantasy/sci-fi movies.
Ooh.
Another fun fact from the script. So, Sarah, you want to get us started on this genre, which I know you love very much.
I do, Adi. I do at that. I was about to say I do, Adi. I do indeed. But then I decided that would be too cheesy, and then I thought it was funny, so I showed it anyway. Okay, moving on to sci-fi and fantasy movies. Anyone who knows me knows that I would die rather than live in a world without Lord of the Rings. So we can maybe start there.
Yeah, that's a good aggressive start.
Yeah. So, obviously, it's a series of fantasy books that was brilliantly adapted into an Academy Award-winning movie trilogy by Peter Jackson in New Zealand. So it's in the news more now because the final Hobbit movie is coming out this December, right at the end of winter break.
Whoa, so soon?
Yeah.
How'd they do that so fast?
Because they film them all at the same time.
Oh.
And then edit them, subsequently.
Oh my
so
god,
they're
torture.
Yeah, so they're filming for a really large chunk of time, but then they release them a year apart.
Wow.
Because they've already done all the filming, basically.
Is that how they did Lord of the Rings too?
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's not the way that they normally make movie franchises like that, you know?
Uh-huh.
But
it's not how you would want to make anything, because shooting for that long in a row, I can't even shoot for an entire weekend without losing my mind. I don't know how these people do it.
Although I think for the story it works well. The original books were never meant by J.R.R. Tolkien to be split up into a trilogy. His publisher did it because the original book was I don't know, something like 2,000 pages long or something.
Oh.
So they split it up so that it would be more marketable, but as a story, it was always meant to function as one. And so I guess filming it together allowed them to, I don't know, keep that sense of unity or something.
Function as one.
Function as one. One ring to rule them all. We both got there.
I participated in the Lord of the Rings reference. That's amazing.
So yeah, Lord of the Rings. I'm not going to say it's the greatest movie of all time, but it's definitely the greatest movie of all time.
Now, how similar is this to your Chunk on Jack show?
So, funny story, our mutual friend Jack Spiro, who is currently abroad, had a radio show last semester where he interviewed professors, and for 2 weeks in a row...
He was not able to interview professors.
His guests canceled on him last minute. So one day he was like, hey Sarah, we both love Lord of the Rings, want to come on my show and talk about Lord of the Rings? And of course, that's my dream. So we spent a half an hour just talking about Lord of the Rings and the differences between the books and the movies and how it fits into this larger fantasy tradition. And then the week following, his guest also canceled, so we had Lord of the Rings discussion part 2 on this very serious radio show. Yeah. What's your favorite sci-fi or fantasy movie, Adi?
I have no idea because, unfortunately, I was never wrapped up in, the big ones, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, which I'll let you talk more about soon. Yeah, I was afraid of Harry Potter as well.
Really?
Happened, yeah. Huh? So I watched the first one, spent the entire time with, my eyes covered.
Oh, in fear of it. Oh.
Yeah.
I thought you meant, I don't know what I thought you meant by afraid, but whatever.
I meant the dictionary definition of afraid.
Good to know.
Oh wow, look, music.
The music's still on, look at that.
Yeah, so, I'm, in the nature of me, I'm inclined to go directly to, animated movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, WALL-E comes to mind. as like a really awesome like projected future sci-fi
Yeah,
movie
definitely.
that's very thought-provoking and adorable. Meet the Robinsons is another one that was just like brought to mind the other day. Available on a Netflix that is not our own country's Netflix.
British Netflix?
Possibly?
Okay.
I looked through a bunch of different ones. Anyway,
Okay.
it's a tangent. Yeah, which is an awesome movie about a kid who goes back into the... No, he goes to the future and does stuff that I won't tell you about. But it's really great, and
Yeah.
it's cute, and Rob Thomas sings a song for it.
Aw, that's so nice.
It's beautiful.
Well, and speaking of going Back to the Future, I mean...
I'm so excited to see that.
Have you never seen it?
No.
Ooh, are you in for a treat?
I've seen the main, like, that iconic scene, like, where Big, like, chases him around the clock tower.
Yeah.
I've seen that one. And I've seen, like, intermittent scenes, but I don't think I've ever seen the entire
I think... So, it's actually a trilogy, and in the
Right.
second Back to the Future, he goes, like, forward in time, but I think that the day that he arrives in the future, like, just happened. Like, maybe I'm making that up, but I remember seeing on the internet that, like, you know, he checks the newspaper in this, like, futuristic cafe, and he's like, oh my gosh, it's, like, October 3rd, 2014, and there are, like, hoverboards everywhere.
Oh, yeah, because the internet was like, we should have hoverboards by now.
Yeah, and that was it, because he has, like, a skateboard thing
Right.
that's a replication of a scene from the first movie, except it's on a hoverboard because it's 2014, and, like, let's be honest, we should have hoverboards by now.
I think we do.
Yeah, there's, like,
Not, like, commercially available
but there's a
ones.
prototype available.
Available?
Oh, no. Like,
Oh.
maybe developed
Okay.
would be the better word for that.
Right. I was like, what? Get me to a Toys R Us. What other stuff? Oh, you want to talk about it?
There's
Fine.
Harry Potter, yeah. I mean, the thing is, my experience with Harry Potter was definitely not with the movies. So, I mean, I read the books growing up, like, obsessively, like, first one in kindergarten, last one, however many years later it was. So the movies never, like, became as important in my own imagination as the
Okay.
books were. I always kind of thought they were, like, fun and, like, fun to watch because they were Harry Potter, but never really rivaled the books. But
So not your favorite.
not my favorite. Although there's an animation sequence in, I think, the first part of the 7th movie. So, like, they split the 7th book into 2 movies.
Yeah.
And there's an
I think I've seen that
animation
one.
sequence in the first one of, like, the Deathly Hallows story that's just gorgeous. I mean, they
Ooh.
absolutely destroyed it with that animation. It's really nice.
Destroyed it.
Yeah. Destroyed! And, like, one of the few points in the movies that I was like, wow, I'm gonna remember that. And, like, maybe even when I read the book, I'll think of, like, this sequence.
And maybe when I'm on a radio show at some time in the non-distant future,
I can
I'll talk
mention this.
about
Woohoo!
it. I feel like I would remember that. I think I've seen the part 1 of
Part
the
one,
7.
yeah.
I haven't seen part 2.
I saw the second part at midnight, like at the midnight release, just because for nostalgia's
You
sake.
gotta.
I mean, they had completely taken up the whole movie theater in my hometown. I mean, every single screen was showing this movie, and
Oh,
they were
wow.
turning people away. I mean, there are like hundreds and hundreds of people here. I saw people there that I hadn't seen since like 6th grade, that I went to middle school with and hadn't
That's crazy.
ever really seen again. It was crazy.
Wow.
Everyone was dressed up. I was dressed up. But again, it wasn't for the movie so much as like an end to Harry Potter.
Right.
You know? Or at least for me, that's what it was like.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly one of the more powerful fantasy stories of our generation, I would say.
I would peripherally agree.
Yeah.
Just because I'm like not as familiar as I
Right.
should be. What are some other fantasy movies?
Well, okay, if we're talking about sci-fi movies, we haven't even mentioned Star Wars, which is like,
True.
the ultimate sci-fi movie, I would say.
Which I'm also the worst and haven't seen that.
Star Wars, I was also obsessed with Star Wars as a child. I don't know if you've picked up on this indeed, but I was a bit of a nerd
What?
growing up. What? I know. My
I've seen the picture of you that's on Facebook dressed up as Legolas is on because of the show.
Yeah, it is.
Because we talked about it and
We
then
did.
you put it
We talked
up.
about it last year because to date that is my most excellent Halloween costume ever. I spent like 2 months putting it together. I was in 5th
The
grade.
Doctor was pretty good.
Thank
I liked
you.
your
Oh,
costume
thank
a
you.
lot.
I was the 11th Doctor for Halloween this year, folks. From Doctor Who, another great British sci-fi franchise,
movie.
except it is a television show.
No, we stick to topics here on the late night format.
No TV.
No tangents. Oh yes, and this movie club is exclusively movies all the time. So listen to this if you don't like anything else.
But yeah, Star Wars as a
Yeah.
major one, especially because for the time when the first one came out, the special effects were actually kind of mind-blowing.
Right.
And I would argue that the special effects in the original trilogy are better than the ones in the new one, like
Really?
the new franchise.
That I haven't seen at all. I've seen the first and second.
Just don't do that to yourself.
I own them. That's the thing.
Okay.
It's great because so I was really into the idea of lightsabers.
Yeah. I mean, who isn't?
Right, but so I became like a super Star Wars fan, like in theory, but not like in knowing anything about the franchise at all, other than lightsabers.
Right.
So,